Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to a new real-life car review. In this episode I'll be driving the updated Suzuki Vitara Strong Hybrid. Now Suzuki models typically have a long lifespan. This generation of Vitara has been around since 2015. It got an update in 2018 where they added the mild hybrid, which is the 1.4 booster jet, 140 horsepower with an 84 volt electric support system. In January of this year they added a full hybrid option, which they call the Strong Hybrid. It's the K15C 4-cylinder 1.5 engine we know from the Suzuki Jimny. It's mated to a robotized or electromechanical automatic gear shift, which has a single clutch 6-speed gearbox, which is electromechanically operated. And they added a motor generator of 60 horsepower and 60 newton meters of torque. And the way they built all of that together is quite interesting. We'll get into detail once we have a peek under the hood. But overall the design of the Vitara is pretty straightforward, I would call it. It's very no-nonsense. It's a car with a can-do attitude. On this footprint they've created a lot of interior space, a lot of cargo space. Now with the 2022 engine update, they also updated the front a bit, but they didn't mention it very much. But all new Vitaras now have full LED headlights, and in this hybrid model, I don't know if it's specific to the hybrid, but they added this blue chrome strip in the headlights, which works really well. LED daytime running lights. We have fog lights over here, which are also LED. And also with the 2018 model update, they added these LED stripes in the rear lights. I kind of like the old design, the original design of the taillights, but works for me. All in all, the design is very square, but as I said, it creates a lot of interior and cargo space for the car. Car has a reversing camera, so I have to clean a bit. I could have cleaned the car before I videotaped this, but 2 minutes out of the car wash and everything is dirty again. What I do like, however, is this large reversing light in the rear bumper. It can be obstructed once you have a tow hook, but all in all, when you back up at night, this provides an enormous amount of light, so that really works well. Also, it has a big wiper on the rear window, contrary to its European competitors. This really works well. Alrighty, let's hop in. So the interior space of the Vitara hasn't changed much over the years. It's very basic, but it also works really well. What I do like about it is it's very spacious in width. The door panels are quite flat. There's plenty of room in height. But what's most noticeable is the seating position is set quite up high and quite upright. It really gives that off-road car feel, which it is. So if you're used to Toyota Land Cruisers, pickup trucks and so, you'll feel very, very familiar with this kind of interior. The dash itself is very short. What I do miss is the analog clock. The first models of the Vitara had of this generation. Was a nice touch in the interior. Over here we have the in-house Suzuki infotainment system. The audio system has very good sound quality for its price point. Navigation is quick and easy to use. All physical buttons for the climate control. We have heated front seats on this trim level. Now on the steering wheel are the shift pedals. You can always interrupt the operation of the automatic gearbox, even when it's in drive mode and not in manual. You can use the shift pedals to interrupt the shift pattern of the car. So for example, if you're under full acceleration, the car often revs past 4,000 RPM. When that's a bit too high for my liking, I just pull the plus pedal and it shifts up. The car is also available with CarPlay and Android Auto, so when you need real-time navigation with traffic information and fuel prices and whatnot, you can just connect it to the system and you can use your smartphone navigation. It mirrors to the screen. Now one thing I really like is that when you switch off the lane departure warning system, it stays off. Even when you stop and start a car, once it's switched off, it stays off. And where I live, it's very handy to have, and I'll show you in the drive segment. It's also noticeable, there's this push button for the front fog lights, and the rear fog lights are on this stock on the steering wheel. On this trim level, the seats are equipped with artificial leather upholstery and this micro suede inserts on the seat back and on the seat itself. And I quite like this material. It's very nice to the touch, but once you're seated, you don't slide over the seat itself. It's like Alcantara. You really stay put in place. And they also used a small panel of that micro suede material on the door, which I really like. And there's padding in this little cushion on the armrest. So even though the door panel itself is mostly hard plastic, the touch points, high touch points, are upholstered with nice materials. Now I moved on to the back seat, and as you can see with the driver's seat in my driving position, me not being the tallest, I have plenty of seating room, knee room, foot room. I can put my foot somewhat under the driver's seat. It's very basic in the back. I must say there's plenty of room. I have plenty of headroom. Seating position is okay for an hour or two. It's very basic. I don't have any armrest. There is no fan here, nor are there any plugs or outlets for power to charge your phone or have a DVD player for the kids during longer trips. It's very basic. But all in all, it's not a bad place to be. What I think speaks for the Vitara is that the window line or the shoulder line is about here. So when you have kids in the back, they can really look out of the windows instead of being in a claustrophobic area, which some SUVs tend to have. The Toyota CHR is the best example of that. So for kids, it's not a bad place to be. I noticed there is a pocket here in the front passenger seat where you can store your comics, and there is a place for drinking bottles. It's very basic, but it's not a bad place to be. Due to the fact that the hybrid battery lives under the trunk floor, the trunk floor has come up a bit. You would normally have an adjustable 2-level trunk floor. You get up the floor and lower it, but now you've got this plastic insert and the battery lives underneath. But you still have 300 liters with the back seat in place, which is very good in my opinion. There are small storage bins on the side where you can put stuff. And once you put the seat back down, you have an enormous amount of cargo space. I'll blink in the exact numbers in screen here. So let's close up and talk tech under the hood. So let's have a peek under the hood. It's the Suzuki K15 engine. It's familiar. It's also used in the Jimny, but this is slightly modified for use in this full hybrid version. Hence it's got the denomination C. The K15C engine, 105 horsepower. Over here, completely on the outside of the automated gear shift transmission, is the motor generator unit, 30 horsepower, 60 newton meters of torque, and the transmission is a robotized 6-speed single clutch transmission. So the clutch is electromechanically operated, as are the gear shifts. The motor generator unit assists when you're driving away from a standstill, so it provides extra torque, and then the normal drivetrain takes over, and during gear shifts and during driving, during acceleration, either assists during driving, so when the gear is engaged, but during the gear shifts it also provides power. The power delivery is shortly interrupted because the clutch is disengaged and it has to shift. The motor generator briefly takes over, so that smoothens out the shifts because it's a single clutch transmission, so the gear shifts take quite a bit longer, especially when you compare it to modern double clutch transmissions. But all in all, it really works very well, and I'll show you in the drive segment. So with a camera handheld, That's where the automated gear shift transmission lives. And if you have a peek through here where my finger is, you see this over here is the motor generator unit. Now, what's interesting to note is this car still has a starter generator. It's a 12-volt system, I believe, so this doesn't have a starter motor. It uses the starter generator to start a petrol engine. So this new Strong Hybrid, as Suzuki calls it, is completely developed in-house. Now, Suzuki already has two hybrid models, the Suzuki Sways and the Suzuki Cross, which are basically Toyotas with a Suzuki badge put on it. And Suzuki has the ability to go shopping in Toyota's parts bins and warehouses, but still they decided to develop this drivetrain completely in-house. As you have seen, they use an engine they already had, a gearbox they already had, and they added a motor generator unit on top of it. Now, how does this Strong Hybrid powertrain drive in real life? Well, it's doing really well actually. It has a combined power output of 115 horsepower and somewhere around 150 newton meters of torque, so that's not all super special. But when you have a calmer driving style, like I have, it works really well. When you're on full acceleration, you can feel the dips in the power delivery, but that is what it is. First and foremost, it's a really smooth drive. One thing that's really noticeable about Suzuki's, they are always fairly lightweight. I'll blend in the weights for this car and screen. And it's always been the case for the Vitara. The suspension setup and the steering setup, those are things Suzuki does really well. If you want to treat yourself to a real nice hot hatchback, you should go drive the Suzuki Swift Sport if it's available in your area. But to me, that was a discovery of the century when it comes to fun driving cars. And Suzuki has this new slogan that says "serious about fun." That goes for the motorcycles, the outboard engines and their cars. And when you look at this car, it's very plain Jane SUV. And when you order it in all-grip version, you have a very capable off-roader. So it's a very sensible car to buy. The residual value of these cars is great. The first cars of this generation with 100,000 kilometers on the odometer still sell for 15,000 euros over here, and you can get a new Vitara base trim for around 30,000 euros. I'll blend in the exact numbers in screen. Don't want to talk trim levels, availability and prices too much, because these videos are aimed for a broader, more international public. Now back to the driving. So I said the slogan "serious about fun." You can say it applies to this car too. The steering is very light, it's very precise, suspension setup is great. As said, it's a light car, so you can carry a lot of speed into corners and exit corners. It really is a fun car to drive. Even with this 115 horsepower, you can really tell the suspension is capable of handling much more, maybe even twice or three times that power, especially when you have the all-grip versions, the four-wheel drives. But I really like the way it drives. And yesterday I was reading back two older tests I wrote on this car, which are basically the exact same car, apart from the drivetrain. That's where I mentioned how the car handles in curves and on bad pavement, on speed bumps, and so it handles really well. Still goes for this car. Now, in theory, there doesn't seem to be that much difference in fuel consumption when you compare the booster jet mild hybrid to this strong hybrid version. But in reality, this gets great fuel economy. Let's go over to the fuel consumption. It's currently at, well, let's say 17.5, 18 kilometers a liter. When you want to get those numbers with the mild hybrid version, you really have to hypermile it. Now I'm entering one of those 60 kilometers an hour areas, as I mentioned. I'm not sure if it shows on camera, but we don't have a typical center line marking on these roads, but there are those markings on the sides which are painted slightly inwards from the edge of the road. And when you have these lane keep assists activated, they tend to steer you away to the center of the road, and it's not much fun with. Now, as I mentioned, the Suzuki Vitara doesn't have all the fancy things you have in other modern cars like digital gauge clusters and very advanced infotainment. But I must say, even though it comes across as a very basic car, it really is a fun car to drive. The gauges are easy to read, and when you're not tech savvy or a little bit afraid or weary of new technologies, this is a great car for you, and it's good to have such a car on sale. Suzuki has the S-Cross on sale next to the Vitara, which are basically the same car. They are marketed differently, but when you're weary of new technologies, it's good to have an option like this, and I must say these cars sell really well. So let's head on out to the highway. Now here is where you can tell you don't have the 140 plus horsepower that the mild hybrid version has. It'll take some time to gain speed. Another thing that's interesting to note is the way you operate the info cluster here in between the gauges. You use this push button. It's not on the end of one of those stalks or on the steering wheel. I have to push this button to access the trip computer, and you can turn it to adjust the brightness of the instrument panel, the backlight. The overall visibility is very good. It does have a blind spot monitoring system, which is very well calibrated. The interior materials itself, the upholstery and the plastics are black, but from the dash on up, it's all light, and I like that. Let's switch off the lane assist. There it is. We're on a nice curvy road. The steering precision is just great. There was a ridge across the road. It didn't disturb the steering a bit. And the steering is very precise. I'm carrying a bit too much speed on this road here. Still, I can position the car where I want. And it's really reminiscent of the Suzuki Swift Sport I drove last year. That thing was fun to drive, and this car is fun to drive. Now smooth acceleration. That's where how you can tell that the motor generator unit is really helping in smoothing the gear shifts out. It's doing fairly well. 70, a bump. 80. Oh, there's oncoming traffic, so I'll leave it be. But with a calmer driving style, the MGU really aids in smoothing the gear shifts out. And I must say, I'm much more for this driving style than I am for a sporty driving style with this drivetrain layout. If you're more of a spirited driver, you always have the choice for the mild hybrid, which has more power. And as per usual, we end up this test drive in the middle of nowhere. Let's hop inside for my thoughts on the Suzuki Vitara Strong Hybrid. So what does the Vitara Strong Hybrid add to the lineup? Well, it's good to have two choices in the Vitara lineup. First and foremost, the mild hybrid version with over 140 horsepower is the car to have when you have outgrown your Suzuki Swift Sport. When you need driving fun, practicality, usability, user-friendliness, and you want fuel economy, the Strong Hybrid is the version to have. And it's also nice to have a choice between the S-Cross, which is more of a connected car in terms of infotainment navigation, it has the e-call and SOS system. For people though that are weary for those kind of technologies, it's nice to have the option to buy a Vitara that doesn't have all that systems. The Vitara, all in all, is more of an analog, more of a mechanical car, which is great fun to drive. That being said, I think the full hybrid version really adds. The fuel economy I get now, it's cold and grey, it's starting to clear up a bit, but in colder types of weather I still average 18 kilometers a liter, so that's very good in my opinion, given the fact that this car isn't built for aerodynamics. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind that if you're towing regularly a caravan or haul anything large, when you opt for the full hybrid version, or if you opt for the strong hybrid version, you get slightly less towing capacity. That being said, all in all, it's a very sensible and it's a very nice car to drive and to own. And I must admit, Suzuki really is serious about fun. With that being said, I want to wrap up this real-life car review. I hope you liked following me along. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel. Give me a like or leave a comment down below. Anyway, that's it for now. As usual, thanks for watching and see you on the next one.